The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Maybe I should have waited and called this week Gambling Week on Fantasy NBA Today. One of these days I'll actually get the title right, but that day is probably not today. However, we will indeed discuss sports betting at some point on today's podcast. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, everyone. I am Dan Besbris, your gracious host here at Hoopball. Hoop-ball.com is the website. At Hoopball Fantasy is the Twitter account. I am at Dan Besbris on Twitter. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. I know I did. Ready to settle back in and start to tackle some NBA stuff. Fun things going on right now. Not even necessarily at the NBA level, but starting to see people coming back into the listening fold here on the podcast. We're seeing the number of listeners begin to increase again, which is your first sign that people are beginning to think about the NBA. Pretty good stuff. That makes me excited. I don't know, you guys probably don't care as much about that, but that makes me excited. It's fun to have you guys back in the fold. I'm sure that'll be the case basically every week between now and the start of the season. You'll just see a handful more people thinking, maybe I should start prepping for Fantasy NBA. Well, you'll be sorely disappointed because today's podcast is probably going to be about 20% fantasy basketball and about 80% sports betting. But guess what, guys? They're going to be tied together pretty soon. That's the world. Sports betting has become legalized, and it's about the states figuring how they want to put this whole thing together. So guess what? We're playing a guessing game here on this show. Guess what? We're going to be ready when your state does. And if your state does already, well, we're going to give you some things you can bet on. We can't do all 30 teams on one podcast. It's too much. Sports handicapping takes a lot of time and energy, so my plan, best laid though it may be, is to talk about fantasy news of the day on my solo podcasts, and then get into some of the handicapping later on in those same programs, such as today. So today you're stuck with me, Dan. Tomorrow, it'll be me and Adrian, as usual, Tuesday show. Wednesday, you've got me solo again. Thursday, you've got me and Neil. And then Friday, Neil and Adrian will wrap up the week. I think they are on their final conference breakdown. Remember, they've done 5, I believe, previous conferences across the NBA, just sort of wrapping things up. Those guys are kicking, well, we try not to swear on this podcast. They are kicking keister. My 2-year-old son loves that word, keister. They're kicking keister and taking names right now. I'm so excited about what the season is going to bring for both Adrian and for Neil. Their involvement here at Hoopball, you guys have noticed, just continues to ramp up. We like to find good ones, and we like to cultivate those good ones. I hope you gentlemen and ladies listening out in podcast land have enjoyed listening to Adrian and Neil as much as I have. And their growth. The growth. I love it. But again, you're stuck with me solo on today's podcast. We'll talk more about what's coming up as the season approaches, and we got plenty of time for that. Wanted to make mention of a couple things on the logistical side here at the beginning of the podcast. We're not going to take too long with them, because I know one of the things that drives people the most crazy listening to pods is when they don't actually get into the material quickly enough. So attempting to do a slightly better job on that. But I wanted to remind everybody again, Hoop Ball listener leagues are open. If you've been sitting there listening to these podcasts thinking, man, today's the day I should really sign up. Well, yeah, but I also can't tell you you have to today because they're going to be open for a while yet. The second Hoop Ball Dynasty League is officially 100% maxed out. So the 2 Dynasty Leagues are full. There will not be a third one this season. I don't know what the future holds, but if you want to be a part of a potential third Dynasty League, get on the wait list in our Hoop Ball forums for the second Dynasty League. We'll build the third one off of that. Again, this could be 1 or 2 years down the line. That wait list will also apply to the second Dynasty League. So if a spot opens up in that one, we'll take people off of that wait list as well. The Hoop Ball listener leagues, the non-Dynasty ones, there are now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think 7 of them open. Last year we ended up with, I believe, 8 or 9. I think it was 8 non-Dynasty leagues. So we're basically there. And we continue to take applications. It's not even that. It's just, do you want to play? Awesome. We'll get you a league. Myself, Neil, we're handling all of that. So tweet at us, at Dan Besbris and at Ball with Neil, if you want to get involved in the Hoopball listener leagues. There are $50 leagues. There are free leagues. There are both head-to-head and rotisserie format. It's through Fantrax. Again, let us know if you want to be a part of those. We'd love to have you. We will continue to take people basically until the last minute, until drafts happen. So, almost another 2 months. So no rush, but also, do it now. Makes our lives easier because then we don't have to deal with you when the big flood of people comes in later on as well. The other logistical thing I wanted to mention, the Brewski 150 recap. Teased you a little bit there. The Brewski 150 recap is almost out at hoop-ball.com. Aaron has gone through his B150 from this last season, the 2017-2018 campaign. He has graded himself on every single player in the B150. He has graded himself against the other big fantasy analyst websites, and ones he got right, ones they got right, ones they both got right, both got wrong, and just talking about what you can learn from every single one of those picks as you start to handicap your fantasy players moving forward. So that'll be coming out probably at the Hoopball forums, I think, but stay tuned. Follow at Hoopball Fantasy on Twitter. Whenever that comes out, I'm sure they'll send a alert through the Twitter sphere. All right, today's topics. Let's get into the actual show stuff. I know that wasn't exactly a quick opening segment, but it's shorter than some. Braid myself on a curve here. Fantasy stuff. You go to the news and you make sure that you're caught up on anything going on in the fantasy world. There hasn't been a lot, but there are a couple of little nuggets that surfaced over the weekend or first thing this morning that I think we do need to touch upon. First of which is that Carmelo Anthony has officially signed with the Rockets. It's done. We knew it was going to be done, but it is official now. And I've said it on this podcast. I said it with Bogman. I was able to hop on with the Lord Bogman, over the weekend, I believe. He had me on his radio show, so thankful to those two guys for that. That I think Carmelo Anthony is actually going to be underrated this season, which I know is sort of it's a clunky take at best, right? Carmelo Anthony coming off of an atrocious season where he sat outside the top 120 in 9 category leagues, despite 1.3 turnovers. It was his best statistical category, or basically a dead heat with his 2.2 3-pointers. So even with his best statistical category included, he was outside the top 120, 16.2 points per game, 2.2 3-pointers, 5.8 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 0.6 steals, 0.6 blocks, on a very high volume, 40% shooting from the field, and a relatively low volume for Melo, 77% at the free throw line. I mean, it was, by all accounts, your Victor Oladipo of a season with the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder run a terrible offense. I do not feel shy about saying it. I've talked on this podcast a lot about how I feel some of it comes down to Russell Westbrook, who creates sort of an artificial floor and an artificial ceiling of what his teams can do on the offensive side. They're never going to be bad because Russ is awesome, but they're never going to be resplendent in their glory because Russ is not a particularly inclusive offensive basketball player. You're never going to see the Warriors offense coming out of OKC. What did they do? I like actually what the Thunder did. They really shored up their defense. They went defense heavy in their offense or their offseason signings. Houston, on the other hand, did get better defensively last year, but lost a couple of their key pieces in that regard, in Luc Mbah a Moute leaving Houston, Trevor Ariza leaving Houston. The bodies weren't available really for the Rockets to buttress those losses on the defensive side, so they went out and got a proven scorer coming off a down year, getting a massive buyout, so, salary wasn't a colossal issue for Melo. So they could get him on the cheap, throw him in, and see what happens. I'm inclined to believe that with the way the Rockets run things, the D'Antoni stuff, and I know the D'Antoni and Melo discussions have happened. Yes, it didn't work out. He was a very different player back then. He also had a very different role. He was the number 1 guy on that Knicks roster, and now he is at best the number 4 guy on this Rockets roster. Maybe on a given night he might be the number 3 guy, depending on whether or not Eric Gordon or Clint Capella is healthy. So I think he understands. I think Melo understands what his situation looks like. So if you can wipe, in particular, last year out of your memory, because I don't think last year is a great example of what Melo's body can actually do. He's older. Make no mistake. He's going to be 34 for the entirety of this NBA campaign, which is definitely a guy on the down slope of his career. But look at the previous season with the Knicks. It wasn't great, but it was certainly useful. 22.4 points per game, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, just under a steal, half a block, 2 3-pointers per game, high volume, 83% at the foul line, 43% from the field. So that number's never going to be great, and especially as his 3-point attempts continue to stay high, while his 2-point attempts are less prevalent. That is to say, his number of shots came down, but his number of 3-pointers didn't. So the percentage of them went up. I know people look at it like, well, he took 5.7 3-pointers in New York. That's only 0.4 fewer than he took last year with the Thunder. He didn't really change the number of 3-pointers he took. Yeah, that's true, except with the Knicks, he took 13 2-pointers a game, and with the Thunder, he took 9. So his shots dropped by 4, and they were all 2s that he wasn't taking anymore. And, by the way, he shot worse on 2-pointers as well. Everything was bad for Melo last year. It is not a carbon copy of what we saw with Victor Oladipo, because Victor was 25, superstar in the making, budding, all of his categories were kind of coming together. Melo is on the downslope of his career. But it is similar in that they both ran into this logjam of an offense that artificially depressed their numbers. So there's no universe where Melo gets back to what he was doing in New York. He's not going to be expected to average 22 points per game. But there is very much a universe where he could get 6 rebounds a night because the Rockets have Clint Capella and then a gang rebounding experience. Trevor Ariza was playing a lot of minutes at the 4. PJ Tucker was playing minutes at the 4. Those guys played minutes at the 5, I think, briefly last year. So there are going to be rebounds to be had. Make no mistake, that'll be out there, and Melo has always been a decent rebounding power forward. Now, he's been in that 6 to 8 range most of his career. That's pretty good. Not great, but decent. He's a decent passer who had no ability to do so with the Thunder. I don't know that gets better with the Rockets, but they do appreciate moving the ball to someone who's open. It's not just, Russ gave me the ball, I better shoot it right now. So I do see a situation here where Melo could get to pretty close to the popcorn numbers he had in Oklahoma City. That is 16 points per game. You could see him around 6 or more. Maybe he gets to 6.5 rebounds this year. Maybe the assists are closer to 2 instead of 1. But the real key, the things that booted Melo, because listen to this. I mean, if I told you 16 and 6 with 2 3-pointers and half a block and half a steal, you'd say, okay, that sounds like top 100, right? On a bad day? But then I tell you 40% from the field and 77% at the free throw line. By the way, folks, Carmelo Anthony's been in the NBA since 2003. That was his worst free throw shooting season ever. Not once has he been below 77%, and he was at 76.7 last year. In fact, you have to go back to 2009 for the last time he was below 80%, even in a partial season. Okay, fine. He was at 79.8 in 2014, but I rounded up. That's a number that's coming back. He's not a guy that's a 76% free throw shooter. He had such low volume at the foul line last year that it just didn't contribute. Well, guess what? the Knicks aren't going to force him to just stand still. They're going to use him effectively. The Rockets, excuse me, I said the Knicks. The Rockets are not going to do to Melo what Oklahoma City did. I get it. He's going to shoot a lot of three-pointers, just like he did with the Thunder. But with the Thunder, they didn't want him creating. It disrupted the Russ-centric offense. With the Rockets, they appreciate a little bit extra. Eric Gordon, did he have an open look? Yeah, but if he kicked it to his left, there was Ariza for a better look. It wasn't just one pass all the time. It's why both Chris Paul and James Harden could rack up so many assists, is because the ball was moving. It would go from one of those guys to another one. Yes, Clint Capella is probably not going to do a ton of passing. And no, I don't expect Carmelo Anthony to be expected to get 3 assists per game. But if he gets the ball at the three-point line, someone closes out on him, and he can beat them, he can beat them. It's kind of like what Eric Gordon does. He goes to the rim more than people realize. He chucks away from outside. I mean, it's a three-pointer or it's a head-down dribble drive, but that's okay. In summation, on the Carmelo Anthony thing, I think I need to make myself much more clear. I'm not advising you go out and you get him. I am not that high on Melo, but I do think that last season left such a bad taste in people's mouths that he'll probably fall beyond where his value will end up. He's probably going to be a top 100 guy this year. Number 95 would not be crazy. Right around 100 wouldn't be crazy because, opportunity's just not that massive. But he's still mellow. He's still got something in the tank. And he's probably going to fall outside of the hundreds in your draft. So get him in the 13th round or whatever it is and sit on him and deploy him when you need scoring categories, which I often do. You guys know how little I care about that stuff. So, have an asset. The other little piece of fantasy news that came out over the weekend was that the Hawks have talked about playing Jeremy Lin at the 2. I wish they wouldn't have put that out, because that was why I was whispering about how much I liked Jeremy Lin. You guys have heard that. If you listened to my podcast about the Hawks when Jeremy was traded to them, you knew that I said, I actually really like what he's going to do for this team. They have no veteran leadership. I mean, squat. Listen to this Atlanta Hawks roster, by the way. I mean, this is impressive stuff. This is truly impressive stuff. And let me make sure that I'm listing off a Hawks roster that has NBA experience in the column as well. Justin Anderson, we're going to do this alphabetically, by the way. Yeah, he never plays. Kent Bazemore, veteran, 6 years in the NBA. Taurean Prince, 2 years. DeAndre Bembry, 2 years. John Collins, 1. Tyler Dorsey, 1. Dwayne Dedmon, 5. There's a veteran. Trae Young, rookie. Kevin Huerter, rookie. Alex Len, I don't even care. I don't know why I've even mentioned him. He's not going to play. Maybe he'll play a little. I doubt it. Miles Plumlee. Okay, so the veterans on this Hawks team are all centers, effectively, who are all going to be playing behind John Collins. The only one on this team, to me, that can kind of settle things down in the backcourt is Jeremy Lin. Unless you call Bazemore a shooting guard, which I guess, he's a wingman. But they're going to need those types of presences on the floor because Trae Young is going to be in over his head a lot. Trae Young is 19, guys. He's 19 years old right now. He'll be 20 on opening day. But if that's the guy you think the Hawks are going to have running the offense every night, yeah, they want him to develop, but they need somebody to keep it settled. They don't want this to turn into Phoenix Suns territory. That's bad basketball. Guys didn't get better because the system stunk, the coaching stunk, and they just let guys do whatever the hell they want. That's not winning basketball. Jeremy Lin, is he a proven winner? It's debatable. But he's an NBA talent who understands how the game is played. The game is slower for him than it is for these other guys, and he's going to be tasked with a similar role, I believe, to what he was expected to do in Brooklyn, which is bring the young guys along, play 25 to 28 minutes a game, do his stuff, keep the offense organized, And when he's on the floor, folks, Jeremy Lin is a stat magnet. I think we've forgotten this because he had such a quiet run after Linsanity. So I don't want to go all the way back to Linsanity. That doesn't tell an accurate story. He's not going to have that type of opportunity here. But he's been dinged up the last season and a half. And that can create a certain bubble around a player. In Brooklyn 2 years ago, when he played 36 games, he averaged 15 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.2 steals, and 1.6 pointers on 44% shooting. That's pretty good, actually, for someone that you can, I would say, very easily acquire in the later rounds of your draft. I mean, I'd be pretty surprised if Jeremy Lin went much earlier than like 115. I guess I don't know for sure. We don't have the ADP on a guy like that yet, but he played 1 game last season. He played 36 the year before. He really hasn't made any noise since 2015? 16? In any event, he was the number 77 player 2 years ago in Brooklyn before he got hurt. Those numbers that I just read off to you. That's basically top 75. Missed it by that much. He missed it by 2 spots. Is that attainable with Atlanta? Hell yeah. Absolutely. I could see him taking 11 shots a game. There's definitely 11 shots in that offense. Because even if Bazemore is running some of the offense at times, he doesn't shoot that much. And Trae Young, they can only watch him chuck for so long. So it's going to be Taurean Prince is going to get a lot of looks. Trae Young is going to get a lot of looks. And then, big men, they get looks when the opportunities arise. So don't look for John Collins to take like 15 shots a game. Dwayne Dedmon, he's not going to be taking a ton of shots. There's your guys. Lin and Bazemore. So there's 10 or 11 shots out there for Jeremy Lin, I would venture to say. Question is, do you think he can stay healthy? If he can stay even remotely healthy, you're looking at a top 75 kind of season. Especially now that they've come out and said, oh, by the way, yeah, he's not just going to be a point guard. He's going to be playing some shooting guard too. Yeah, we knew that. We knew that because they need him out there to keep things calm. I think NBA teams have largely figured out that you can't just let a rookie point guard go nuts or the rest of your team will lose their minds. You'll lose all of your games and nobody will get better. So hint, hint, wink, wink, I like Jeremy Lin. I wasn't particularly covert about it. But of course it comes down to health. And that's why I think you could take that flyer late and say, you know what, if he stays healthy, this could be a great pick. If he doesn't, whatever, cast it off into the wind and move on to the next guy. All right, sports betting. I promised a little bit of it. Let's see how many we get to before we hit about the, I don't know. What am I going to cap this one? 35, 40-minute podcast? That's probably about as long as you guys want in the offseason. I prepared 5. I don't think we'll get to all of those, but let's start it out and see where we get. Last week, I gave you a sneak preview of the process that I go through as I'm handicapping these overs and unders. And the team that we used to talk about that process was the Atlanta Hawks. I didn't really give a concrete number or feel for Atlanta at the end of that podcast, but that's where we're going to start. So I'm going through these alphabetically. There's no rhyme or reason to it. That's just a way that my brain can process things. I don't know if you guys know this about me. I have about 500 DVDs here. I've collected them. I know that's stupid because you can live stream everything over the internet now, and that takes up no space in your home, space that is at an insane premium when you live in a 2-bedroom apartment with a 2-year-old son. But I have them, I love them, and they are organized alphabetically. I am extremely anal, so doing these alphabetically just felt right. The Atlanta Hawks, their number is 23.5. I have a lean to the over. And I think that's what I said last week, although I honestly don't remember because we were sort of roughhousing the number a little, just beating it up, just for the sake of argument. Here's what I've written about the Atlanta Hawks, and then I'll extrapolate from that. I think the Hawks tried to get worse, but I think they failed to get worse. Does that make sense? And I know I just talked about Jeremy Lin at at insane length, which seems sort of stupid to now transition to how I think they're going to be okay. The Atlanta Hawks won 24 games last year. And their number this season is 23 and a half. Last year, we took the under on a 25 and a half line because I felt like they were going to give up. And they did. And it was glorious. That was a tank victory for us. This year, there's a few things that work in our favor. Here, let's break this thing down. The Hawks did get rid of Dennis Schroeder, who, for all of his fantasy issues, was their best player. They got rid of Mike Muscala. And I'm still not sure if he wants it to be pronounced Muscala. He was a versatile big man. He could space the floor a little bit. They brought in Jeremy Lin, who is injury-prone. They have a rookie point guard, which is terrifying. All of these things that I've just told you are reasons to bet the under. But there's, I believe, stronger factors working the other side. Number one, and this is one that you'll hear me talk about on a lot of teams that have pretty polar, and when I say polar season win totals, I mean ones that are at the very high end or the very low end of the possible spectrum. And the Hawks have the lowest win total mark of any team in the NBA at 23.5. It's really hard to win less than 24 games. It's really hard to lose 60 games, which is basically what you'd need to do to get under that mark. 59. Yes, I know how to do math, but 60 is a nice round number. There were only 2 teams last year that would go under that 23.5 mark. The Memphis Grizzlies, who lost Mike Conley early and then just went into mega tank, and the Phoenix Suns, who are the single most lost, or were, and we'll see how things shake out this year, but have been for about 3 years now, the most lost organization I could ever imagine. The Phoenix Suns had far and away the worst scoring differential of any team in the NBA at -9, basically. They were just getting throttled every single game. The Memphis Grizzlies were at -6, which actually translates closer to about a 24-win team, but they scored so few points last season. I think they were like second from the bottom offensively, their clunky little pace, that it translated badly for them. You know, the ability to tank close games. Like Dallas. Dallas is a fantastic example of a team that really tanked well. They tanked so well. They won only 24 games last year, but their scoring differential was -2.7, which is far from 24-win territory. Listen to the teams that have a worse scoring differential than the Dallas Mavericks. You already heard the Phoenix Suns, the Memphis Grizzlies, the Sacramento Kings, the Atlanta Hawks, the Orlando Magic, the Chicago Bulls, the Brooklyn Nets, and the New York Knicks. And of those teams, only the Grizzlies and the Suns were behind Dallas in actual overall ranking. So there is a tanking element to this stuff where you can force yourself into more losses. Dallas forced themselves into what you'd probably argue is about 5 extra losses last year by tanking as hard as anybody in the NBA. Phoenix was truly bad. The Hawks were, by all accounts, better than some of these teams. I mean, they were better than the Sacramento Kings in a scoring differential. Kings play in a tougher division, mind you. But the Hawks could have very easily had 25 or 26 wins last year, but they too gave up near the end of the season. So they too tanked their way out of a couple of wins. All of this to say, if you're actually trying on a night-to-night basis, and I'm not saying the Hawks are going to try to win every night, but if you're even trying a little bit, you can get to 24 wins pretty easily. 24 wins is like nothing. It's a lot of losses. Let's remember, everybody, the tanking rules have changed this year. So this is a little bit of a different bird that we're working with, and it's possible that teams surprise us, which is a shame, but we're going to go on the assumption that teams are going to do what makes sense logically. The bottom 3 teams in the NBA all have the exact same probability of getting the first pick in the NBA draft. The Atlanta Hawks feel like they have a very real opportunity to be one of those bottom 3 teams without having to adjust their odds manually. That is to say, like Dallas did this year. They adjusted themselves into a better pick. The Hawks are going to be in that bottom 3 pretty much regardless of what they do. So I don't think that they're going to have to dump games down the stretch. I think that they're going to get to 24 wins, and I think they might even get to 25 wins this year. So for that reason, I think I like the over. For a couple other reasons, I guess I should mention as well. Taurean Prince, if he continues to play as well as he did in the second half last year, that'll be good for the Hawks. John Collins has shown excellent growth. He looked awesome at Summer League, which I realize is stupid, and I don't want anybody to take anything from it from a fantasy perspective, but he's clearly better than those other guys. So get rid of the tank. Understand how hard it is to lose 60 games in an NBA season. Just understand how difficult it is to lose that many times. Like even Phoenix, barely. They missed that mark by 3 games, and they were one of the worst teams I've ever seen last year. And, I guess we should also mention, the East is weak. The East sucks. They're going to have 4 games apiece with Toronto, Boston, and Philadelphia. Fine. You could even call that 12 stinking losses, but you still got 70 games left, and the rest of those teams are not world beaters. Sorry, Indiana. You did great last year. You heard me here on this podcast lobbying for them to be, coach of the year, Nate McMillan, all that stuff. The Bucks, they should be better. I mean, fine, but all of those teams are beatable on any given night. We've seen it before. We'll see it again. So Hawks slightly to the over. The Boston Celtics, their number is 57.5. By the way, I don't know why. I think some websites are listing Brooklyn before Boston because they're going by abbreviation. But let's be clear. Alphabetically, Boston comes before Brooklyn. So whatever website you're reading, send them a note that says, Dan says you got it backwards. Boston Celtics, I like the under on 57.5. We had the under last year on Boston and barely, by the skin of our teeth, got that wager right, and we frankly didn't deserve it. If Gordon Hayward is healthy the entire season, they probably go over. If Kyrie Irving is healthy the entire season, they definitely go over that last year's mark, which I believe was 55.5. But we snuck by thanks to injury. But we also almost lost that wager last year because the Celtics were, I don't want to say a big surprise because people figured they'd be good, but I don't think people realized how hard they were going to play every night right out of the chute. And Boston got off to a great start before their lack of offense caught up with them. Their defense played well. It played up in the postseason. Without Kyrie Irving, that's when a team that plays great defense can really excel. In the regular season, you will eventually fold under the weight of your own effort. This is a key, by the way. This is a key gambling tenet, not just for season win totals. Teams that play at the pace that Boston did, and I'm not talking about how fast they were actually going on the floor. I'm talking about the effort level that every single player was giving every single night. Teams that play with that level of energy and commitment always end up getting hurt. Always. It is not an if, it is a when. It is why people that like college basketball talk about how NBA players don't play hard every night. They don't. That's the honest to goodness truth, and that's okay. Because if they did, in an 82-game grind, they'd be hurt. It's why we're able to hit at such a high percentage on individual game wagers in the dog days, December, January, February, because we know that there are going to be games where teams are going to go at less than 100%, and you fade them those nights. But Boston didn't do that. They were going at 100% maximum burn every night until the whole damn thing came apart. It's like, oh, what terrible luck for Boston. Nah, not really. I mean, yeah, maybe some of those guys could have gotten a little bit luckier, but when you play at that level, things are just going to get bruised and beaten, and part of you starts to hurt, so you compensate, and something worse happens. And that's why I like the under this year. I think Boston learned a lesson. I also think that they believe they have a path. I think they do want home court. You know, we saw how much better they were in the postseason last year, so that would lend itself slightly to the over. But again, with LeBron out of town, they know they're going to be comfortably in the top half of the Eastern playoff bracket, so maybe there's a road series somewhere in there. I think this team realizes the impact of having their superstars at playoff time. If Boston had Kyrie Irving last year, they might have gone to the finals. They ran out of firepower against the maximum firepower guy. And now he's in the West. So I believe Boston is going to dial it back a tiny bit. Not a ton. You know, I still think they're going to have a really good regular season. But 55 wins is more than enough to get them to probably the number 2 seed, maybe even the number 1 seed, depending on where those 55 wins come. You know, is Toronto going to be able to go at the clip they played at last year for all 82? Are they going to hit 59 wins again? I think Toronto is better, but they were about as good as you could imagine last season. I mean, they were just destroying people. And there's going to be an adjustment period for the Raptors as well. There's going to be an adjustment period for Boston with Gordon Hayward coming back. I mean, they haven't played a regular season game together. So I know it feels weird to say, well, Boston was at 55 last year, and they didn't have Gordon Hayward for one stinking day, and Kyrie Irving was gone for the last 6 weeks of the regular season. So surely, you know, if they were at 55 last season with all that mess going on, they should be able to coast to 3 extra wins, but I just don't think it's that simple. They're going to have a target on them this year. They're not going to catch teams by surprise. I don't think that they're going to give the same level of grind on a nightly basis because it does break you at a certain point. I think maybe you even see a rest day here and there from some of their big guns. And I think it'll be enough. They know it'll be enough to get to 55 or 56 wins, so I lean to the under for the Boston Celtics. And I think I'm probably fairly alone on that wager. I'm aware of that. All right, let's do one more team, and then we'll wrap it up. We'll do 3 of these breakdowns on today's show. It's fine. We can talk about this for the next month for all I care. Brooklyn Nets, 32.5 is the number for the Brooklyn Nets. That's a big jump, ladies and gentlemen, from where their number was last year and where they finished last year. And yet, I have just the tiniest lean to the over. This one's going to be one of those ones that I think we're going to be kicking back and forth all season long. Let me start my breakdown on Brooklyn by saying I think there's a very reasonable chance that Brooklyn ends up right on the number. Like, I think they could be at 32 or 33 wins at the end of this year. My lean, 50, just over 52.4%, enough to cover your VIG, is that they get to 33. I'd be pretty surprised if they got to 34 or 35. I'd also be pretty surprised if they didn't clear 30. So there's a window there, and the value might even lie just a tiny bit on the under. But if it's that close, if you're splitting a hair, then I'm going to go in the direction that I think is going to be the final outcome. Last year I said I thought the Nets would get to 27 or 28 wins. They did. Nailed that one right on the nose. So why do we think they're going to go up 5 wins season over season? They didn't add a superstar. They didn't add the kind of player that can give you 5 wins all by themselves. They got rid of Jeremy Lin, who didn't really play, but was kind of a stabilizing force. But there's a lot of little things with the Nets, to me, that all rolled together get you to 5 wins. Number one, the East sucks. As simple as that. The East is weak. They'll be able to pick off some wins against teams that are probably better than them on paper, but just aren't ready on a particular night. Nets get hot. 2, the Nets have a bunch of young guys that should, I put should in bold, italics with an underline, should get better. Karis LeVert should get better. Spencer Dinwiddie should get better. D'Angelo Russell, I hate him, but he should get better. I don't hate him. That's stupid. I hate his fantasy game. But he should get better, especially if they let him work a little bit more off the ball. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson should get better. Jarrett Allen should get better. Joe Harris should get better. I like a lot of these young guys. So let's say all of those young guys get a little bit better. That alone, without any roster changes, should be able to get them from 28 to 30 or 31. Conservatively, I think you could say those guys improving give them an extra 2 to 3 wins. But they brought in 2, and I'm eliminating Kenneth Faried because I don't care about Kenneth Faried. They brought in 2 veterans that I think are going to be really nice stabilizing forces for this team in Shabazz Napier and Ed Davis. Those guys give Brooklyn an element that they didn't have in the past. Napier is a terrific perimeter defender and a very good point guard with some floor spacing ability and slashing ability. He's better, I think, than people realize. Ed Davis, excellent around the rim. Good finisher. Nets didn't have a ton of great finishers last year. Right? I mean, it was Jarrett Allen late in the season, but he didn't do anything early. So now they have a finisher and a rebounder. Nets lacked rebounding ability at times last year. Ed Davis gives them that as well. I think you could give Shabazz Napier and Ed Davis 1 game apiece. Let's say they each contribute 1 win to this team, and that gets us to 33. Now, some of it's going to come down to how these guys are deployed. How much Allen Crabbe are we going to see? How much Damari Carroll are we going to see? How much D'Angelo Russell at the point are we going to see? I do trust that they'll figure this thing out. That Kenny Atkinson and the Nets front office has a plan. Sean Marks has been great in what they've been able to move to get assets. They've brought in nice pieces to surround their young guys. This training level for them. This is a season where they can start to move their way up the ranks a little bit. I don't think it needs to be a maximum tank fest. I think they like the young guys they've got. They've got some good picks to deal with in the future. And to me, they're too good to be at the bottom of the heap. And I doubt that their sales pitch to Napier and Davis was, by the way, we're going to tank for 4 months and then we're going to trade you. So I think they're going to try to win. That's more than half the battle with these bad teams in the NBA. I like the pieces they've added. I like the progression of their young guys. I think this one's going to the over. And that, folks, is where we're going to put a pin in things. Because we're over 40 minutes, I thought we'd try to keep it to 40. These breakdowns took longer than I expected. On Wednesday's show, I will try to leap straight into the sports betting stuff. That'll allow us to get to 5 or 6 of them, hopefully. Knock a few of these bad boys off the chart, because there's 27 teams left to cover. But in between, we've got other fun stuff to talk about. Adrian Benjamins will join me tomorrow, my illustrious co-host, also Neil Rochlani, my other illustrious co-host on Thursday's show, and then, as I mentioned earlier, Adrian and Neil on Friday. Come join us in the Hoop Ball Listener Leagues. They're going to be a lot of fun. We'll have them open for 2 more months. Again, you can do that by tweeting at Dan Besbris and at Ball with Neil. Follow at Hoopball Fantasy for all of your information. Go to hoop-ball.com for stories, updates, and all that fun stuff as well. Have a wonderful Monday, everybody. I am Dan Besbris. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.